people watching, they're expecting McLaren to be back on top a bit more here. So where's that pace missing at the moment?
I mean, different. But I think others are just also improving. The Mercedes are doing a very good job. Red Bull, like we've seen, have been very good last few weekends. So nothing's a surprise. I think the only thing is Singapore has always been a little bit of a weird one, and we know we struggle whenever we struggle with the front tires. We struggle a lot as a team. The whole weekend we've been struggling with the front tires, and in the contrary to that, we know that anytime everyone on the grid, like everyone in F1, struggles with the front tires, like they are this weekend with the new tarmac bits, Mercedes is normally always the team that comes out on top, like Vegas last year, for instance, and things like that. So I think we understand when you put two and two together why we've struggled a little bit, just the front of the car not being strong enough and too much understeer and things like that. Then you have to make compromises, you almost give up rear grip for that, and you just kind of get into a bad area. So we understand it. Making improvements on all these things is the bigger, not worry, but the bigger thing we have to work on. And today makes you feel like no matter, even if we're fighting, we're trying to win the constructors this weekend, 6 rounds early, 7 rounds early, whatever it is. It just feels disappointing that we're not quick enough. That's why it really doesn't matter when you say you dominated one weekend or 2 or 3. When you come here and you're just 3/10 off, you just feel too slow and you don't feel like you've done a very good job. So we clearly have work to do.
He called it his worst nightmare. He blamed himself before blaming the car. And then, in one of the rawest interviews of the season, Lando Norris said what no one at McLaren expected to hear. These are the shocking statements from Lando Norris after Singapore qualifying, and the story behind them will change how you see this driver. Every Formula One weekend begins with data, optimism, and a sense of control. But for Lando Norris, Singapore broke that illusion almost immediately. On paper, his results from Friday practice looked respectable, 6th in FP1, 5th in FP2. But inside the cockpit, he already knew something was wrong. The McLaren that had been his trusted weapon all season suddenly felt disconnected, heavy on entry and lazy in response. Even the smallest steering input gave unpredictable reactions. For a driver who thrives on front-end sensitivity, that disconnect felt catastrophic. What the timing screens didn't show was the erosion of confidence happening lap by lap. The man who had dominated this circuit a year ago was now searching for balance, not just in the car, but in himself. His post-session radio messages revealed the shift. "My car isn't half a second slower," he said sharply. "My driving is half a second slower." That statement, broadcast to millions, was as raw as it was revealing. It wasn't an excuse, it was ownership. Norris has always carried an almost surgical self-awareness, dissecting his own errors before anyone else could. But in Singapore, that awareness turned into a weapon he used against himself. Every corner became a test of belief. The harder he tried to adapt, the less natural the car felt. He was chasing rhythm on a track that punishes hesitation. And hesitation, for a driver, is like blood in the water. The circuit feels it and devours you for it. Then came the moment that sealed the tone of his weekend, a minor pit lane collision with Charles Leclerc during a restart after a red flag. The damage to Norris's front wing was minimal, but the psychological impact was deeper. The timing couldn't have been worse. He was already battling inconsistency, and now his focus was fractured. Anthony Davidson, analyzing for Sky Sports, called him visibly unsettled afterwards. He was right. For the first time all year, Lando looked unsure of what the car would give him next. That uncertainty rippled through the team. Engineers began doubting the setup philosophy, questioning tire prep sequences, and adjusting parameters mid-session, a desperate attempt to chase confidence that simply wasn't there. The technical analysis after FP2 confirmed Norris's intuition. His issues were isolated on the soft tires, the compound every driver depends on for qualifying magic. On mediums, the car behaved predictable, balanced, confident. But once he switched to softs, the front tires refused to enter their temperature window. The result was understeer, the very handling trait Norris despises most. "It's my worst nightmare," he admitted. The irony was painful. McLaren's car was too kind on its tires, unable to generate heat quickly enough on a circuit where aggression wins. While Piastri thrived with a slightly sharper setup, Norris felt trapped in a machine that punished precision and rewarded chaos, the exact opposite of his natural rhythm. What made the situation even more revealing was his reaction. Lesser drivers blamed the car. Norris didn't. He blamed his adaptation. He told his engineers that he'd lost the feeling from last year, as if the missing performance wasn't mechanical, but emotional. That phrasing, feeling, is sacred in racing. It's the invisible bridge between instinct and machinery. When that bridge breaks, even the best drivers look ordinary. Every great lap starts with trust, and Norris's trust was gone. Watching him in FP3, you could see the hesitation in micromovements, braking a meter early, hesitating on throttle, correcting small slides that never appeared in 2024. Those milliseconds, invisible to fans, were bleeding into tenths on the stopwatch. By Saturday afternoon, the warning signs had turned into a diagnosis. The MCL39 wasn't misbehaving randomly, it was revealing its limits. McLaren's conservative upgrade philosophy, designed to ensure consistency, had finally met a circuit that demanded aggression. Norris could feel the car's mechanical grip vanish in slow corners where downforce couldn't save him. The once fluid connection between driver and chassis had turned into a tug-of-war. And in that struggle, the truth became clear: this wasn't just a setup issue. It was a fundamental misalignment between Norris's style and McLaren's design direction. Singapore didn't create the problem, it exposed it. And deep down, Norris knew that his greatest strength, his precision, had become the one thing his car no longer understood. When the lights of Marina Bay reflect off the carbon fiber of a Formula One car, they expose everything: the precision, the flaws, the limits of design. For Lando Norris, Singapore revealed McLaren's deepest weakness. The MCL39, a car that had looked nearly bulletproof on medium-speed circuits, suddenly turned fragile when pushed to the edge. On the soft compound tires, the ones that decide qualifying glory, the front end simply refused to cooperate. The grip didn't build, it faded. The steering felt numb on entry, and every attempt to rotate the car was met with resistance. It was like trying to turn through glue. In a sport where feedback defines confidence, that silence from the front axle became torture. "The fronts never switched on," Norris said later. Simple words, but they described a fundamental engineering problem that McLaren couldn't hide behind data. The MCL39 had been designed with balance in mind, a car built to protect tires, not abuse them. On paper, that philosophy worked. Over race distances, McLaren excelled at maintaining performance. But in Singapore's heat, under qualifying loads, that same characteristic became a curse. The tires needed aggression to generate temperature, yet the car's mechanical platform smoothed out the violence needed to activate them. "I'm short on front grip, and that's my worst nightmare," Norris admitted. The phrase summed up the mismatch perfectly. The McLaren was too polite for its own good. It handled predictably, but without the bite needed to dominate a single lap. The team's conservative setup approach, keeping the rear stable to preserve traction, robbed the car of the front-end aggression that Singapore demanded. As the engineers chased numbers, Norris was chasing feeling. The problem wasn't just the tires, it was the flow of energy through the car. The front suspension geometry, refined to suit the smoother circuits of Europe, struggled to load the tires evenly on Marina Bay's uneven surface. Every bump disrupted weight transfer, leaving the car light on turn-in and heavy mid-corner. Norris described it as a rhythm that never settled, a car that was always one step behind his inputs. McLaren's data confirmed oscillations in steering torque and lateral load, clear evidence of instability between the mechanical and aerodynamic grip phases. To most viewers, that looked like understeer. To Norris, it felt like betrayal. Every time he asked for rotation, the car hesitated. And hesitation in Singapore costs everything. Inside the garage, tension built quietly. The engineers knew the numbers, the driver knew the truth. "We can't get the fronts alive without overheating the rears," Norris was told over the radio, a technical catch-22 that defined McLaren's entire evening. The team could push more brake balance forward or soften the front anti-roll bar, but every adjustment came with a price. The car's equilibrium was too sensitive, too perfectly tuned for ideal conditions. Marina Bay is never ideal. The heat, the traffic, the low-speed traction zones, they punish any imbalance. Norris's frustration wasn't directed at his team, it was aimed at physics. He was driving a car that could either protect tires or attack corners, but not both. And in qualifying, compromise means defeat. Then came the human element, the psychological toll of precision without reward. Watching the onboard footage, you could see Norris fighting the car like a craftsman trying to sculpt with a dull blade. Every correction was subtle, controlled, but the time loss was relentless. "He's driving like he's trying to make the car behave," Anthony Davidson remarked on Sky Sports. And he was right. Lando wasn't chasing time anymore, he was chasing compliance. He'd stopped trusting the car's promises of grip. That loss of trust changes everything: your braking points, your corner entries, even your confidence to push the throttle. When a Formula One car stops responding the way your instincts expect, you stop being a racer and start being a manager. And Lando Norris is not built to manage. He's built to attack. By the time qualifying ended, the numbers told a story: 5th on the grid, 4/10 off pole. But the deeper truth was mechanical. McLaren's front axle couldn't deliver the bite needed to unlock the soft tire's full potential. The MCL39 stability, its greatest strength all season, had turned into rigidity. It was a car that refused to adapt when the surface, temperature, and pressure shifted against it. "We couldn't get the front to work," Norris repeated after the session, this time softer, almost defeated. It wasn't an excuse. It was a confession. The car that had made him a title contender was suddenly reminding him of how fragile performance really is. Singapore didn't expose a bad driver, it exposed the fine line between dominance and desperation. And on that humid night, Lando Norris stood right on that line. When Q3 began, the heat shimmered across Marina Bay like static electricity. The grandstands were silent, holding their breath, as the final session promised to decide everything. For Lando Norris, it was supposed to be the reset: 10 minutes to reclaim control, to silence the doubts that had been creeping since Friday. His first lap looked clean, even elegant. No slides, no drama. But when the timing screens flashed up, the truth was brutal. 4/10 down. Smooth had turned into slow. The McLaren MCL39, graceful through the medium-speed corners, was lethargic where it mattered most. In a car that once responded like an extension of his hands, Norris now found a stranger. The lap was clinical and lifeless. And he knew, deep down, that the tires were already gone before he even crossed the line. Between runs, the McLaren pit wall scrambled. Engineers debated setup tweaks that were now meaningless. You can't fix a temperature deficit with software. You can't will tires back into life once they've fallen cold. But hope makes people stubborn. "Let's give it one more push," came the radio call from Will Joseph, measured but uncertain. Norris agreed, because what else could he do? As he rolled out for his final attempt, the outlap became an act of desperation: exaggerated weaving, late braking, trying to force warmth into rubber that refused to wake up. The rear tires flickered just under the thermal threshold, while the front still lagged by 4 degrees. In Formula One terms, that's a chasm. A tenth of a second lost in every slow corner, a driver fighting physics while pretending control still exists. The onboard footage from that final lap tells a story that the numbers never can. The steering inputs were fast, aggressive, almost angry. In the first sector, Norris missed apexes by inches; in the second, the rear snapped on throttle. Yet somehow, he held it together. This wasn't a lap for perfection, it was a lap of willpower. When he reached the final chicane, he pushed harder than ever, searching for a miracle. But miracles cost precision. On exit, his rear right brushed the wall, a soft kiss of carbon against concrete. It cost him 0.06. The difference between 5th and 3rd. In the post-session analysis, that touch looked minor. But to a driver living on the edge of self-doubt, it felt like confirmation: the night wasn't his. As he coasted across the finish line, the voice in his helmet was silent. No shout, no sigh, no celebration. Just breathing. The kind of stillness that happens when a driver knows the story's ending before the screen updates. "P5, said Joseph softly. "Copy," Norris replied. Nothing more. It was one of those moments only Formula One veterans recognize, when the battle shifts from the stopwatch to the mind. Because fifth on the grid meant something different for Norris. It meant he had been beaten by both Mercedes, by Verstappen, and, most painfully, by his own teammate. The same teammate he'd led all season. For the first time in months, the number 3 car had outperformed the number 4, and that cut deeper than the lap time itself. When he climbed out of the car, the weight of that silence followed him. Cameras captured a smile that wasn't real, polite words that felt rehearsed. "Not a great one," he told Sky Sports, his tone neutral but his eyes restless. "I just couldn't get the fronts to work." He said it once, then again, almost like he was convincing himself. The journalists nodded, the fans sympathized, but the truth behind those words was layered. This wasn't just a bad qualifying. It was the moment he realized McLaren's strength had become its weakness, predictability without adaptability. He'd given the car everything, and it gave him back indifference. For a perfectionist like Norris, that's worse than failure. Failure you can fix. Indifference you can't. Back inside the debrief room, the tone turned forensic. Data screens glowed blue and orange as engineers traced telemetry overlays between Norris and Piastri. The gaps were small, a tenth in Sector 1, 2/10 in the technical middle. Yet to Norris, those numbers weren't abstract, they were emotional. Each tenth was a question. Why him? Why now? He'd been the consistent one, the patient one, the driver who could extract performance without taking risks. But Singapore punished patience. It rewarded aggression, adaptability, and chaos, all things that Piastri, fearless and instinctive, had delivered that night. For Norris, this was a psychological turning point. His talent wasn't in doubt. But his trust in the car, in himself, in the process, had taken a hit. And that's what makes a qualifying collapse truly devastating. It's never about one lap. It's about what the lap takes from you.